So uh, basically, blah, 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 lawsuits, I'll tell you, my advice is try to avoid them. And I had successfully, never had an issue with the client. And this was, quite a surprise because, again, I consider myself to be a pretty reasonable, approachable guy. And, run into someone who was litigious was a surprise to me. Any rate,
So let's pause there for 1 second, David. So I really want to paint this moment, and because I've been there in a very small version, but so how does a lawsuit get presented to you? All right, gang, welcome back to another episode of From the Trenches, a Barry McKinley Vision podcast series we're doing. We'll remember that this is just a couple of guys talking. We're not here to sell you anything. We're not here to have some big key takeaway moment or some big call to action for you. This is just a couple guys chatting, talking about MSP, talking about life, talking about business. Today, I've got just an amazing guest, David Prince from Databranch. Normally, I would be asking our guests, how they get started in this crazy MSP world, but I'm going to do the lead in for David just a little bit because I've known him and known of him for so long. I could argue 20 years, probably 19. But David was a client of my mentor, Larry Scholes at Taylor Business Group a million years ago. Shout out to Larry and Taylor Business Group. Even though I don't think he's my biggest fan anymore, that's okay. I still love him. David was a client of Larry's a million years ago, and he was really the first MSP that I met in real life and got to hear what being an MSP was all about. And, probably a much smaller company than he ended up being, and just watching how hard that business was and how gracefully David went through it. And so I've just kind of been able to get these little 5 or 7 year check-ins with David over the years. And so I'm just really honored and pleased to have you on, David. So welcome to the podcast.
well, thank you, Josh. It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, right on. Well, we're gonna have a chat, and I'm gonna kind of lead in where I would like to start, and we'll just see where we land. David, one of the first things, and I was just telling you this in our little pre-talk there. One of the things that happens, and I don't know if it happens to you, but I get the opportunity to talk to 5, 10, 15 MSPs every week for the last million years, it seems. So whenever I'm talking to somebody, this little movie kind of runs through my head when somebody has a scenario or they're sharing a story. I'm just thinking of all these MSP owners and great employees that I've met over the years, trying to find a relatable, moment in what this person's telling me. So your face always comes up when I hear about like lawsuits or people just having a tough moment in a transaction. And I thought, if you don't mind, we'd kind of start there because you did have a just very unique situation in your business. Now, I understand you have now successfully exited the business and that went really well. But you had a weird moment about 15 years ago. Would you mind kind of sharing what that moment was and what that looked and felt like a little bit?
Sure. Always good to start with the easy stuff, right?
Yeah, we're jumping right in.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. They say life, teaches you, different lessons at different times. And it was about a little over 20 years ago.
Is it
Well, yeah, about 19 or so.
Yeah,
So
okay,
you're right
right.
about our time frame. Any rate, we had acquired a business. In 2004 with the assistance of Larry, who you mentioned, who really was a great advisor to us and helped for the business during some challenging times in the early 2000s. That whole transition from being a very hardware focused to becoming a service focused business is not wasn't a smooth road for everybody, and certainly not for us. Um, but we got through it, and became, I guess, what we all call MSPs, now. But back then, that was a term we hadn't coined. But anyway, we had acquired a business. It was a business that was in um, a lot of distress. They were losing quite a bit of money, and so, but we uh, uh, agreed to acquire them and see if it would help us expand into a different market and all that. And so we did, and fortunately, we were able to turn the business around fairly quickly and got it, making money, which was terrific. And so we were was helping us grow, during that time. And then, unfortunately, the guy whose business we'd acquired was, um, uh, unhappy after things started going well, with, uh, basically with the agreement. And um, even though we had basically based on results, of course, and profit, which we'd achieved, and we're everything was good there. Um, Rather than talk to me, as a person and all that, I was surprised to get a lawsuit, totally out of the blue, and this was like 2000 and uh, I don't know, May 6, 2006. Yeah. So there you go, time frame.
Yeah.
Um, and basically, saying, all kinds of terrible things about me and my wife and everybody else. Uh, and then, saying that he didn't like the contract. And, so uh, basically, blah, 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 lawsuits. I'll tell you, my advice is try to avoid them. And I had successfully, never had an issue with the client. And this was, quite a surprise because, again, I consider myself to be a pretty reasonable, approachable guy. And, run into someone who was litigious was a surprise to me. Any rate,
So let's pause there for 1 second, David. So I really want to paint this moment, and because I've been there in a very small version, but so how does a lawsuit get presented to you? Like, how did you find out there was a lawsuit?
I was at work on a Monday morning, doing what we all do at my desk, and someone came to my office and handed me a document, said, "You've been served."
Okay. Now,
Yeah, eh,
very few people I've ever met get that paper and say, "Ah, all right, here, I'll send it to the attorney. They'll figure it out." I think a lot goes through our heads. Do I have any money to defend myself? Do I even know a good attorney? Is this going to bring me to knees? How did you react? Were you pretty, just shocked and furious and terrified? Were you pretty sensible and calm and level-headed? How did you react in that moment?
yeah, I was certainly surprised. I guess you know my nature is to be pretty level-headed and calm in a crisis. I credit my father for that. I'll just say a little bit about my dad. He was a 30-year Navy veteran. He fought at Pearl Harbor in World War II, retired as a captain. So he was, it was and is still, my hero. I'm looking at his picture in my office here. And you can see I have some naval stuff behind me. Anyway, um, so when when bad stuff happens, the calmer I become, and so that was which served me well, in my business career and perhaps sometimes in life. At any rate, so I contacted. We did have an attorney who I knew was excellent, and reached out to him. Gee, this is unexpected. What do we do? And kind of the process started grinding, slowly from there. Um, I did find out. I called down to the other location, which was a few hours away. Found out, that the individual been in and taken things from the office and and all that, and everyone was a little surprised. So my first concern was for that business, that location, to stabilize everything. So that was where, once, I put the thing in the hands of the attorney, to get, things started, I focused on making sure that, that, business, that location, was going to be okay.
And so you were pretty calm with it. Now let's, because this is my own anxiety, I'd be like, how much does an attorney cost? How much is it going to, cost me to go through this? That would unfortunately be early on in my thoughts. When you look at the however long that event took to resolve itself, were you 5 grand into this thing, 20 grand? Generally speaking, what did you have to pay to defend yourself against this?
Yeah, you know, I probably, put it from mind. It was, probably more in the, let's call it, 10 to 10,000, 20,000, maybe. An amount that a check I would write, um, you know, 100 times over because, I think I told you at the end of the day, when we finally got, in front of the judge, the whole thing was summarily dismissed with prejudice, and the judge couldn't believe that this lawsuit had been brought at all. It was frivolous, and away it went, and that was kind of cutting to the story. But yeah, it actually cost a lot less than than expected, just because my attorney was he was just very efficient and good. But it just took the biggest part was kind of the distraction to from a business standpoint. It took I don't know, years,
Really?
right, to
Wow.
sort of grind very, very slowly. And it was, that's all. It was really a business distraction during, and it's hard to run a an MSP business. As Larry used to say, it's hard to win in the NFL. It's hard to be a successful, MSP every day. So that was I think my biggest takeaway from a learning experience standpoint. I was that I and the other side I think is that it caused me to be a little gun shy about acquisitions. It sort of that side of it. So really I think the takeaways were uh, be careful about who you get into business with. Of course, we all know that. And, try to protect yourself as best you can, from having a situation like that. And to be specific, one of the things that we have in our MSA, Master Service Agreement with all our clients, um, is, there's no lawsuits. There's arbitration,
Yes. Yes.
right? And,
Yes.
and, and if I'd had that in that contract, that probably would have short circuited the process and gotten it done, taken care of, much more quickly. So if I could have any advice, you can never completely, protect yourself, but have some, some clause that, if things go badly, that you have a better dispute resolution than, going through the grind of the legal process.
Right. Well, that's very sound advice, I think. So as you go through that, the money was not uh, terribly debilitating to you. It was obviously a good value. You learned some lessons along the way. What um, what did the next kind of 20 years look like for you in terms of did you do any more acquisitions? Did you grow your business through acquisitions or through other means? How did we continue after that?
Yeah, the focus really was on organic growth. We had the two locations. So, I guess the good news is, that geography turned out to be a very good, part of our business and still is today. Um, but no, that was it. No more acquisitions. And and sometimes I would look back and say, gee, that obviously can be a very successful and good way, a legitimate way to grow. And obviously we're part of an acquisition on the other side eventually. Um, but really it was just a matter of, once that distraction was gone, to continue to refocus on building the business and growing, you know,
Nice.
that was it.
Always interesting to me. I probably the two most common calls that I get at any time from strangers, from clients, from old clients is, you know anyone looking to sell, right? And so it's very much part of the culture right now $300,000 MSP, $50 million MSP. that is part of the business strategy more so than it's ever been is, can I buy someone? Can I buy someone? And, people will bring me deals that they're looking at, and, they range from really good deals to deals that just like, I'm not sure I see the value in this, but, um, you got out of that mindset pretty early. It sounds like maybe informed by the scenario you had, uh, but for that, would you have done more acquisitions, or do you think it just kind of wasn't your thing anyway?
No, probably. I mean, we actually, way long ago, we started a Databranch location in another city. I'm talking like late '80s, early '90s, free internet, uh, and we ended up selling that business to the guy we had running it for us, and happy to say business is still going under a different name, doing very well. Great guy. We still stay in touch. So, but that, the lesson there, this was so long ago. I mean, it was we didn't have the systems in place to, we were growing like gangbusters. Again, I'm talking the early, formative years of the company. And, there was uh, no PSA, no this, no, none of the tools, none, then so, the reason we, got out of that was we couldn't, we didn't have the bandwidth for it. We couldn't manage it. And then, it worked out well, for everybody. But, looking back, there were times when after, the experience we went through that, I thought, yeah, probably would have been open to acquisition. I certainly, it's a great way, can be a very much of a win-win situation for everybody. So I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Just for me, we didn't pursue that path further.
So let's transition a little bit to a much more positive story of actually, and I know the word still kind of feels weird, selling the business. Uh, I want to just kind of talk copier dealers for a moment, because you sold to a copier dealer, correct?
Yeah, primarily. Yeah,
Yeah.
they had an MSP
Yes.
group, but their primary business really was a copier dealer. Yes.
So I'd love to give this kind of little vignette here. If I had the great opportunity to get introduced to a lot of MSP or copier dealers through the Copier-Dealer Association and the subgroup that they formed, the MTA. And so we got this great crash course in copier dealer world. My only exposure to copier dealers before that was through the lens of the MSPs. And there was this kind of very traditional thinking of MSPs, which was, yeah, copier dealers are a threat to us, but they suck. They're terrible at MSP. They're terrible at IT. Usually we're taking business from them, and there's very kind of a defensive type of mentality against them. And so that kind of informed me with no experience. I was like, copier dealers bad. They suck. They're transactional. They're all the things. And I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but that was what I would think. When I met these copier dealers through the CDA, I was blown away. I was like, yeah, they're struggling to figure out the model of IT, but they are smart. They've got great sales teams. They're generational businesses oftentimes. They're awesome. Once they kind of make a few little tweaks collectively, they're going to crush it. And I look at the copier dealers now and I say, they are the biggest threat in any given community to the MSPs, because as they figure it out and they get better every single quarter, it seems they're going to win the game if MSPs don't figure out at least the sales component. How having now being inside one of them yourself, how do you feel about that kind of thesis around the copier dealers can really make a huge impact in any market relative to other MSPs?
I agree 100%, Josh. I mean, I have nothing but respect for, any successful business person. But also, the copier guys, they understood recurring revenue before we even like knew what it was a thing.
We'll be right back with more, but first, here's a quick message from Baring McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy. chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Barry McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Really. And they're really, really, really good at it. And Copier-Dealers and insurance agencies, right? Those guys know, and so you're talking like, well, we've discovered this amazing model about getting paid on a regular basis. So like, yeah, what a surprise. And we dabbled, early on sometimes with trying to get into some imaging deals, like and trying to compete against, Copier-Dealers, and we always got, handed when we dipped into their, their area of expertise. But as far as being a threat, I mean, they've got relationships, many times with thousands
Yeah.
of clients, long-term relationships, usually more developed sales processes, often with, sales managers or sales directors, something that for many MSPs is a big leap, service organizations. So, but yeah, they some of them have a hard time figuring out, the nuances of, our business, the MSP side of it. But, in our case, they, as a parent company, they were great to work with and
Yeah.
continue to be great to work with. And again, nothing but respect for, the leaders of those businesses. And so, yeah, never underestimate your opponent.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And as you, as you're going through the day to day, the quarter to quarter of running Databranch, I know just your history of being with Taylor Business Group and what a great foundation they can create with that right chart of accounts, the financial metrics, understanding service delivery, all the better. Um, you were probably pretty well. Um, a good infrastructure of business. And I lead all that up to say, when you got into this mode of talking about an acquisition with this company, did you initiate that conversation? Did they call you out of the blue? How did that start forming? How did that deal start forming?
Uh, sure. Yeah, I can, if I can step back for a moment, just kind of, my exit journey, was a multi-year thing because there were like a few things, some false starts along the way, which again, I always look at that as learning experience, which kind of got to the point of it turned out to be a very successful, transaction for everyone involved. So just, if it's okay, if I can
Yeah,
divert a little
please.
bit. So, let's see, around 2014 or so, again, was that now 11 years ago, a company reached out to us, another MSP, out this way in Western New York, and they, started, said they were interested in, talking about an acquisition out of the blue, and so, talked to these guys for a while, went through, a lot of process, and even to the point of having an LOI, in front of me. And at the end of the day, we didn't go with them, but that was like a wake up that yes, our business has value, but there are a lot of levers that we still need to pull to increase the value. because one of the and I wasn't ready yet. Either from a business standpoint or I guess personal standpoint. But I saw, gee, we have work to do. So then we, kind of went back to work, dug in, growing the business and all that, and then then we reached out and started worked with I guess an M&A guy, right? Someone who does that, and that's how we ended up getting in contact with the company that ultimately acquired us. So it was a process, but I think through that process, I learned a lot again about how to be prepared, what things you need to do to make a business more attractive, and we really did. We were, from that 2014 time to the time we were acquired, we more than doubled the business and the profitability. And so it helped me refocus. So, I still know the guys who reach out to us, and they're still, I believe, running a good business, way back then. And I thanked them, because even though things didn't work out, I learned a lot from that, and kind of what, needed to do and what we were ultimately looking for. So, yeah, by the time, we, did, get to the point of meeting the right people, we had the systems in place, and probably most important, we had, the management in place, and that was a piece that I was missing. It was pretty much me and, some trusted people, but I didn't have the what happens if Dave goes away covered, really. Which, if from a acquiring company standpoint, is critical. And somebody pointed that out to me again, along the path, who I'm grateful for that. And so that was something I did, to get kind of that key lieutenant, that key right hand person in place, and that was really a key piece to make the transition go smoothly.
Yes, yes. I like the two versions of the journey of somebody came out of the blue and then you went more intentionally, some years later. What we observe a lot is that out of the blue happens, and I always just really get pretty forceful with my clients that it's like, you may not be in a stage where you are managing your business by the numbers. You may not be in that stage where you've got all the data in front of you easily for you to use. But when that call comes out of the blue, you're eventually going to get the right call that you get excited about. And if that infrastructure isn't in good condition, you're just going to go from excited to discouraged and discouraged, because what they're looking for is, how well are you running this business? What have you been using to run this business? And what can we, the buyer, look to see about your business to learn, and not just have to go by your narration of the business? What can you show us? And I see that happen over and over and over again. And I kind of reckon that, with your background with TBG and all the work you put in, that you probably had a pretty good story to tell, and it's probably pretty easy for them to read the story. Is that likely true, or were you pretty
Yeah,
full? Yeah.
no, and you hit the nail on the head. I think from that kind of serendipitous, somebody calls and say, "Oh, this is great," to refocusing and saying, "If we want to do this, we're going to make this an intentional, multi-year plan."
Yes.
And we focused, on, frankly, you know, uh, removing, some of those little perks that we might have as a, let's call it a, small business owner, things that are called add backs at the end of the journey. You don't want to have too many of those, right? Because that becomes a discussion point. So, we really looked at that. We, and as well as, what can we do to, really make this thing a profit, machine, and that would, be an attractive looking business for a potential acquirer, as well as the management piece, the
Yeah.
systems, things like that. And so that, when the time came, we were prepared.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of learning for me, along the way of that process.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could certainly see where, having that lieutenant, having that key person beyond just the owner, where that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I'm glad that you had the opportunity and the foresight to kind of take that initial moment with that first buyer and say, okay, I have a better plan that I want to implement to get that goal of being able to successfully exit. When you got to that point, kind of what told you were ready to go to market with the business? What were some of the indicators or emotions or whatever you use to say, I'm ready, let's make the call?
Sure. Yeah, it was really about probably, I call it 2019 or so. The business was doing well. I was getting to a point in my life where I was, wanted to, uh, chart out, what's next. Had been doing it for, well, since 85. So, that's a long term time in MSP years, right? It's more
Yes.
like almost like dog years, right? Um, and so just looked at that and talked with my wife and about that, and wanted to realize it too, that at least for us, and I think for many MSPs, it's not like, okay, here are the keys, I'm selling a car. Even that's the other thing I learned is, the people want you to stick around for a little while, a few years at least, to make sure that the transition is smooth, that the people who are acquiring the business get the value that they're seeking. So just kind of looking ahead and say, yeah, this is a good time to be serious about it, and I think I mentioned to you that we had been on a really good run. Each year, had gone record year, record year, record year. Our recurring revenue had grown tremendously. Had gotten to a point, from where I felt, I good about it, if such a thing as whatever that means. And so I felt that we were in a good place. Kind of had the pieces in place that hadn't been there, and those were the things that went into the decision to really be serious about it. And so, we worked with our M&A advisor, who was a fantastic Sherpa, and I highly advise that too for colleagues, to have someone help you with it. That was the other thing I learned. That first time when the people reached out, I didn't have that. It's just me, and how many times do we sell our business? Hopefully only once, right? So you want to do it right, and so we had a really great team that we worked with, and that was part of it. And they then provided kind of the roadmap of the things we needed to prepare, uh, you know, to go to market. And so then in February of 2020, we went out, we're marketed, if you will. And I don't know if you remember what happened around February 2020.
Vaguely, vaguely.
I'll tell you, talk about low points, mentally. Like, here it is, everything is perfect. I mean, the business, record profits. I've got worked my tail off to get everything ready as far as the presentation and all that. And something bad happened for all of us. And I thought, oh no, this is it. And for a few months, so there was a lot of initial interest, and then it went away. But then around May, came back in a vengeance, and we had a number of people who expressed interest, and we were fortunate to have multiple interested parties, and be in a great situation that way. Um, but ultimately, found really the right fit with the people who we went with, and so we started talking around May of 2020. Again, still tough times for all of us, but like many MSPs, business was great. 2020, we were helping clients, and our fellow MSPs all over, United States and the world, I'm sure, to survive and deal with, the pandemic. So then by June we had the LOI. during uh, June, July, kind of August timeframe. The whole due diligence and and all that went very smoothly. And then end of September was when we did the transaction of 2020.
That seems like a nice, smooth, fast deal. From my vantage point, did it feel like it was moving at a good pace to you as well?
Yeah, it did. It really was a nice pace. And again, credit to the people we were working with on all sides.
Yeah.
Everyone was, focused on, and uh, you know, unlike the previous experience that we talked about, this was couldn't have been better.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that moved along. Now, I'll share with you just through my observations. Of all the companies I've seen sell, my back of the napkin math is that most of the owners, sign some sort of 1 or 2 year, hang around, agreement. But 7 months is how long the average that I think I've observed of owners being able to stick around. It's just too emotional, too hard to watch someone else raise your kid, or whatever the things may be. 7 months tends to be about the average that I've seen in my little experience. You obviously have been there much longer than 7 months. What do you attribute that to?
No, that's a really good point, and it's interesting because when we had first started talking with the people back we didn't go with, they wanted like 3 years, and like 3 years, my head was exploding with
Yeah.
that's impossible. Um, but with the company we eventually joined, who acquired us, they wanted 2 years was the the contract, and I think part of it was we were geographically a ways away. So we weren't absorbed, okay, now we all go to work at a different place and that kind of thing. I mean, we were like 5 hours away, across New York State. So, and they let us run our business. They didn't want to come in and change a lot of things. They were really happy with, the way things were. Said, just do what you're doing. We can learn from you. And so, do what you're doing, but, obviously more, right? And so, I think being allowed to, continue to, you know, on the journey, that without a lot of, uh, I guess to put it, if you're doing well in a business, you don't get a lot of uh, over, let's say management or micromanagement, right? It was unnecessary,
Right.
right? And that was, I think part of it. And again, the people, um, that just wasn't their nature. And oh, the other thing, they had done we were like the 13th acquisition for
Oh, wow.
for the imaging company. So they were experienced, and they bought most of the other copier companies, but they bought an MSP or two out, kind of the other geography. So they knew how to do it. And that was one of the things, Frank, that was attractive to me. Like these people, besides being great people, also know what they're doing, know how to do this. So I think that was part of it. Again, I just found I was enjoying it, rather than the and so continued on the business journey for a couple of years, and then transitioning over to my lieutenant, and uh, his is a great story too, because he's a guy who I'd hired as an intern when he was 19 as a tech. He worked for us for a number of years. This is let's call it early 90s, right? Whenever long ago. And then he left and went away and worked in a healthcare system for a number of years, and he did extremely well. And that, and for lack of a better word, say he grew up, right? Of
Yeah.
course, and but we stayed friends and in touch. And so when I knew, I wanted that, needed that key lieutenant, I'd reached out to him, and got him on board. This was like 2019, 20 timeframe, and that was a key piece. And so I was enjoying, helping him grow and develop, as a, you know, uh, as a leader and running the business. So I think that was really a part of it. It was a different challenge for me.
Yeah.
I didn't say, oh, gee, I'm not able to do things the way I did before. Any regrets? It's like, oh, this is good. I'm able to do different things, and so then after the 2 years, handed over the reins to Mike, and then they asked if, hey, would you like to kind of stay on as a consultant, advisor, founder role, and I said, yeah, sure, that'd be great. So I did continue the transition stuff, but really got involved with like some special projects and mentoring and things like that. And I expected that really, honestly, to go like a year, but it's now, 3 years later from that, and still doing it and enjoying it. And I think I told you before that, people ask me, well, how is it? And I said, look, I still care, but I don't worry. And that's the biggest difference.
Yes.
And if you run an MSP, it's like being a captain of a boat. And I think, I know I did a lot of sailing
Yes.
in my days, and ocean racing and all that stuff. And, you can't put that burden down. If you're the captain, you're the president, the owner of the business. Yeah, you can go on vacation, have a great time and everything else, but you can't, at least for me, I was never able to put that, that weight down. And, obviously, that was something I was, done. And I care. I take a lot of pleasure in the fact that every year since we sold has been a record year. And most importantly, to me personally, that after the 2 years of transition time has been every year a record year, and that's what makes me the proudest of the people there and the team, and makes me realize that I did the right thing.
That's pretty amazing. Let me as we start winding down, I just a thought keeps running through my head that I think you'll be able to either relate to or easily dispel. You probably aren't like a UFC fan, are you, by chance?
No,
Probably
not
not.
really.
There's the biggest fighter in the game was this guy Conor McGregor, and a very common name. Lots of people know who he is. He did so much outside of the ring that he built his wealth very, very large, and this is true of lots of fighters. That when he started getting to these just astronomical financial levels, um, his fighting just kind of went downhill, and the question starts coming up. Why do people fight? Well, they fight because they don't have much any other options. In life, they just weren't built for a more traditional career. So when they reach that financial security level, it's like, well, why are you fighting now? And I kind of relate that to you to say, okay, you sell the business, you whatever, payout you got was probably a nice payout. I know myself, I'd be like, God, why do I want to go in and keep working and doing this thing I've done for so long when I've had this financial success? What kept you going, and what kept you wanting to stay in there or still stay on top of your game when it's like, okay, the financial security piece is that box is checked. I've had 35 plus years of doing what I do. I've checked the box of whatever emotional or professional reward I get from that. What keeps you going now?
No, that's a great question, Josh. And I remember I read a book, not to compare myself by any means to Bill Gates, but right, but obviously phenomenal guy, but interviewed sometime probably in the relatively early in his career, and when he was already like a billionaire, just one maybe. And they asked, well, what keeps you going? If you've got all the money you need. And he said, if it was about the money, I would have, would have retired long ago. And this was like 30 years ago.
Yes.
No, and then it's so, I always kind of took like, it's about making a difference. And, for me, it's something that's always been important, got from my dad and my brother, and, I think, realizing that yeah, certainly financial security is an important goal and necessary, really. It's all one of the things we all do this. But you reach that point and realize it's not really the destination. You know, the the journey still continues. I think it's like everything in life, in the goal. When I get to whatever goal that is, then fill in the blank. And I think I almost surprised myself with that point as I got to that point and said, you know what, I still feel like I have more to give and to and do. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I think as long as I feel like I'm helping and making a difference, then that's at my schedule, right, which is obviously fantastically reduced from what it was when you're running a business. And I think whether it's retired, there's only so much golf you can play, and especially now, from, and I think and I serve on the hospital board and have done that for over 20 years, and I find fulfillment in that. And I think, but I guess that would be my thing is, you always got to look for something that's going to help, keep you young and engaged and everything else. And, at some point, I won't do this anymore, right? They'll say, okay, well, but at this point, I'm still, I feel blessed that I still am enjoying it and am still working with great people.
Yes. Well, in our pre-talk, I could sense a little hesitation on your part to say legacy, but I think it's really fun. I think, just on the most basic level of, we named our company, whatever our name was, ABC Computer, Tech Advantage, whatever we came up with at all those years ago, to see that name kind of, feed our families, feed our employees' families, help these people, that's a victory in itself. But to see us exit our business and that name go on, I think that's a really special, neat thing that not all of us will get the benefit of doing. How does that sit with you to see this little name? Like, you can probably remember when you finally settled on it, and yet here it is. Someone else owns it. Someone else is doing great things with it. How does that feel? Does that matter to you?
No, that's a great point. I think, again, kudos to, our parent company, right?
Yeah.
Yes, they said, oh, no, we want Databranch to continue. You guys have built this brand over, all this time, and rather than, be able to absorb and change the name and away you go. So that, does bring a certain amount of pride.
Yeah.
And, I could have named it like Prince Systems or something. But I think somebody else got that name. But yeah, that is a nice thing, and I'm still looking at like I have my old business card here on my desk, and
Yeah. Nice.
so that's nice to see, and again, even better that it continues better than before with the team that's taken it over and taken it to the next levels.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well, that's awesome, David. Well, listen, I'm certainly going to extend the invitation for you to come join us again. After all these years, there's so many stories yet to be told. I'd love to eventually dig into your experience making that transition from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, and the business model changing so much over time. So hopefully you'll answer the call once again when we call and say, come talk to us again, because there's a lot of great stories in that mind of yours, I'm sure.
No, I appreciate it, Josh. And you're right. At times, I would feel like I run 4 or 5 different businesses because of how much it really did change.
Yeah.
And there's, and again, lots of kudos to our fellow MSP brethren out there. A lot of times I would think, obviously everyone competes and, all that, which is, of course, important and part of business. But in many ways, we're brothers in arms, trying to protect our clients against, threats and everything else.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a very noble business. And so for everyone who's doing it, carry on the good work and, be careful out there.
Yeah, Thank you, David. See you next time. Everyone else, if you think we earned it, give us a like, share, subscribe, put some comments in the below comment field, and have a great day. See you, David.
Thanks, Josh. You take care.
Yeah, very good.